Welcome to the Wood Life Podcast. Today we're honored to have Chuck Leavell with us, keyboardist, musical director for the Rolling Stones, key player with the Allman Brothers Band, co-founder for the Mother Nature Network, and a champion of the environment. Chuck, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Great to be here.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
What first drew you to the piano? What kind of music filled the home growing up in Alabama? And we'll let you take it from there.
Okay. Well, I was the youngest of three children in the family. My brother, 14 years my elder, and my sister, 5 years older than me. And my mom played the piano. She was not a professional. She was not a teacher, but she played for family enjoyment. So with my older brother and sister out in school when I was very young, 5, 6 years old, dad out working, it was me and mom in the house most of the time. And so I'd love to hear her play. I'd tug on her skirt, "Mama, play me something." And she'd oblige, and man, I was fascinated, watching her hands go up and down that keyboard and listening to the noise that came out of that box, And she would get me up on the stool and show me very simple things, kind of occupy my time, little melodies and triad chords and things. And sometimes she would leave me to my own resources. She would say, "Well, Chuck, I've got to do some work now over here, but why don't you sit up here and you can work on something I've shown you, or you can just make something up. It doesn't matter. Just have fun. I'll be listening," And so that's the way it started. And I began to kind of solve the puzzle a little bit at a fairly early age. I only had brief, real lessons from a woman when I was 6 years old. By that time, my ears had superseded my eyes, so reading music became very difficult for me. I could hear things and imitate them, but relating that to the notes on the page was difficult. So I just kind of stuck with it through the years is what happened. And of course, when I got older, 12, 13 years old, my cousin played guitar, taught me some things on the guitar. Rock and roll came into the picture, British invasion. We started a little band called the Misfitz, Misfitz. We had to be cool, But we were a good little band, and Mom let us rehearse in her living room. We'd move the furniture out of the way, set up the amplifiers. At the time, my first keyboard was a Farfisa organ. I don't know if any of those listening out there know that, but that was a kind of an instrument of the 60s. And we had a good little band, and we played the YMCA every Friday night for the kids. And so that was a steady gig, and we actually got paid. We got paid like $50 between four of us. And then the first television station came to Tuscaloosa. That's where I grew up, Tuscaloosa, Alabama. WCFT, and they wanted to emulate American Bandstand, and they hired us to be the local band on Saturday morning. So we had the Friday night gig and the Saturday morning gig, and it became an enterprise, for us, and we were having fun, and so that was how it all started, and I just stuck with it.
And how old were you when you had the Misfits?
That was 13, 14 years old.
Pretty young. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it was. We were having so much fun. It was a good band. The bass player's father was actually the music professor at the University of Alabama.
Oh, wow.
So, he was legit.
Yeah.
And we switched guitar players once, and the second guy that we had was really, really good. And that's when we did the television program. And you can imagine now, this is in the mid-'60s, okay, maybe 65, 66. And technology was not what it is today. So for the visuals for the television program, there was no, the things that you would put up on the screen with script and whatnot. And so they had these placards, they'd take a cardboard rectangular placard And when Ronnie, the guitar player, was doing a solo, placard might say, gut plucking Ronnie. And if I had a feature on me, oh, go get 'em, Chuck, you know. And unfortunately, they did have videotape back then, but because, you know, economics was an issue, they had to use the tape over and over. So unfortunately, I don't have any evidence, video evidence of our band, but I have good memories.
Yeah. So I got to ask, being from Alabama, are you a War Eagle guy or a Roll Tide guy?
Hush your mouth with that War Eagle mess now. Tuscaloosa, baby, you know.
There you go. Yeah.
About 3 years ago, I was asked to give an address to the Auburn Forestry School, which I did. And by the way, you know, it's a beautiful campus, Auburn, and it's a great school. But you know, in the process of this event, there's speeches, and every time, you know, someone would get up and be introduced, they would end with War Eagle, you know, War Eagle, War Eagle. So my turn got up, and I said, I hope you guys appreciate how difficult it is for a guy from Tuscaloosa to say the W-E word, but I'll do it anyway. War dang Eagle.
That's awesome.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. That's right.
So one question I've got, you said at a really early age you could hear it and then play it. And Dustin plays
the opposite.
He plays instruments, and I was asking him last night, I was like, with somebody at your level of talent, with your, you know, instrument, I said, Dustin, you know, is it practice? Is it natural? It's usually both. But obviously, so your connection to get one hand or one finger to do one thing and the other hand to do another, that's unique. And you had that early on? You recognize that? Or?
Well, I had to work on that.
Okay.
You know, the left and right hand independence is really an art, and you do have to work at it. You know, it's a good friend of mine was Ian Stewart, who was a confidant. Actually, Ian Stewart formed the Rolling Stones. He put an ad in the paper for musicians that were interested in playing the blues, and that's how the whole thing started. And Stu was a really great piano player, and he loved boogie-woogie music, and that's a form where the left and right hand really is the art, right? So anyway, Stu was quite good at it, and as we became friends, I said, Stu, you know, what can you tell me about improving my left hand, right? Because I was mostly just doing octaves and not really using it that much. He said, well, tie your right hand behind your back, put your left hand on the keyboard, find a pattern, and just keep doing it and do it till it hurts, and then do it some more. And really, that's one of the ways it works. You know, you just have to develop the muscles in these fingers and in the wrist and so forth. And, you know, he would say, all right, do this pattern. He'd show me a pattern on the left hand, and then said, okay, take your right hand and play one note, you know, one note. And then keep doing it, add another note or two until eventually this becomes automatic on the left hand. It's there, and you don't think about it. And then the right hand can do whatever it wants, you know. So it's an art, but it's a learned art.
Yeah. Decidedly more complex than running the Sawmill, you know, and an LT40 and walking with it, you know.
Yeah,
the only thing you've got to worry about is like a debarker and a potentiometer, and that's it. The other thing, you're just locking in your forward. So
I don't know, man.
The two don't really equate, but yeah, I was saying I can't rub my belly and pat my head at the same time. So I had a ton of respect for that talent to watch you play. So it's awesome.
So Chuck, after you moved to Tuscaloosa and you kept growing in your musical ability, still having your mom around, I did want to ask, what kind of music would your mom play? What was her?
Well, I'll tell you what was on our turntable was Roger Williams, if you remember him. He was a big sort of pop, if you will, solo piano player. But of course, a lot of his recordings would have orchestration and whatnot. That was on the turntable. Ferrante and Teicher, if you remember them. They were a team of two piano players, and they were brilliant. His Ferrante's son went on to become a pretty well-known jazz guy.
Okay.
And I'm sure he's still around. Russ, I think, was Russ Ferrante, the son. But anyway, they love that. However, one of the most interesting records that we had was, and this became really my hero, was the Ray Charles record, Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music.
Yeah.
And that was a fabulous record, you know. That's where here's this soulful, great guy with this unbelievable voice, great piano player, who's basically known for blues and R&B and jazz, to do a country record. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was, you know, a bold move and a very interesting move. And boy, did it work. You know, that was. As long as I'm talking about Ray, I might as well tell the story that when I was probably 12 or so, I was playing some piano, and my sister had a date to go see Ray Charles in Tuscaloosa at the Coliseum, and my parents had an engagement, and they were going to be gone at the same time. They didn't really want to leave me at home alone, right? So they asked Judy, my sister, "Can you take Chuck along with your date?" And graciously, she said, "Okay, Mom." But so I went along, and wow, that just changed my life. Not only Ray was amazing, of course, but you had Fathead Newman on saxophone, and man, he was just blowing his brains out. Billy Preston was playing Hammond B3. For those that may not know who Billy was, he had a great solo career, but he also played on records with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and many other artists. And he was in the band with Ray, and the horn arrangements and just how powerful that band was. Mm-hmm. When I left that room, that's really when I decided to stick with music. You know, right. I said, man, if I could ever be in a band, not necessarily a band exactly like that, but if I could be in a band that would move people like that just moved me, that would be my goal. Mm-hmm. And so that's pretty much where the turning point happened right there.
And then, so you were in Tuscaloosa for a few years, but then you made a long trek from Tuscaloosa to Muscle Shoals, Alabama, just right up the road from you. And that's kind of where all the major musicians of the time were really flocking. I found a really neat quote from Bono, and he was talking about Muscle Shoals and kind of the studio there, Fame, and was talking about how there's multiple places in the world where music just happens next to a river. You got the Tennessee there.
Tennessee River,
You mentioned, the Mississippi down in Louisiana, in New Orleans. And then also mentioned River Mersey in Liverpool, and he said there's something about those places. He said it's like the music comes from the mud.
Great quote.
Yeah,
man.
I thought that was really, really cool way to say it. But there was a lot to Muscle Shoals and what was going on at that time.
Yeah.
Is that what kind of drew you to be there? That sound, the people. I mean, because there's no other reason really to go to Muscle Shoals necessarily. I mean, there's, that's kind of our country, a lot of trees there.
First of all, it is a beautiful area of Alabama, northern
gorgeous
section of Alabama, and that beautiful wide Tennessee River is gorgeous, and there's not only Muscle Shoals, the Quad Cities, I think it is, or Sheffield and let's see, Muscle Shoals, Sheffield, two others that I'm blanking on right now. But anyway, there's all these little small communities. And you have to also understand, Muscle Shoals is not all that far from Nashville.
Right.
And so there was a lot of players that would go back and forth from Nashville and Muscle Shoals. But for whatever reasons, and as Keith Richards said in an interview once, there's something in the water, right? And so it just developed into this fantastic mecca of especially R&B music. That's where you had Aretha Franklin, Wilson Pickett, Sam and Dave, and those kinds of artists. And the white musicians, what was sort of freaky about it was, they knew how to play that music.
The Swampers.
And they had the funk, man. They had the soul. They had it's in their blood, in their DNA. And so when they would, do a record with one of those guys, Wilson Pickett or whoever, it was like, wow, this works.
Yeah.
And they were big records. They sold really, really well. And Rick Hall, who ran Fame Studios, he had a brilliant mind about putting the right musicians together with the right artist. That started to flourish, and then the guys that were working for Rick started their own situation with Muscle Shoals Sound, and that was the Swampers that you mentioned. Barry Beckett on keyboards, Jimmy Johnson on guitar. You had Roger Hawkins on drums. On drums, and the bass player David Hood.
Yeah.
He's the only surviving guy right now, David Hood.
Really? Yeah.
He's still around. But those guys could play, and so they left Rick Hall, and of course Rick was all upset. And by the way, anybody that's interested wants to see this documentary. It's just called Muscle Shoals, and it's well worth a view, and it tells the story better than I'm doing now. But anyway, so
that's where the Bono quote came from.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
But then it just blossomed. It was like everybody wanted to come to Muscle Shoals. Bob Dylan came to the Rolling Stones came to Muscle Shoals. All of these people share, this vast array of talent had to go to Muscle Shoals. Everybody wanted to know what the heck is this about, and basically, in my opinion, it was about the talent of those musicians. They could play with anybody. Steve Winwood and Jim Capaldi took the band Traffic from England to Muscle Shoals and used them and did a record there. And they liked them so much they actually took them on tour.
Oh, really?
For a period of time. But the guys didn't really like that. They liked being at home and, going home and mama cooking biscuits and grits and fried chicken,
Yep.
So they did a brief tour with those guys. And it was funny because Steve Winwood, who was a friend, said, we felt like we were corrupting those guys. And it was good that they wanted to go back home,
Yeah. So you left Muscle Shoals, went to Macon.
Well, yeah, here's, I'll try to put this story together, and this might take a minute, but a good friend of mine named Paul Hornsby was in a band called The Hourglass. Now, The Hourglass was a precursor to the Allman Brothers Band. So you had Greg and Dwayne Allman and some other Alabama guys, which included Paul. Well, they had gone to California and done 2 records for the Liberty label, and they had mild success, but not big success. The band eventually broke up, and Paul came back to Alabama, where he was from, and settled in Tuscaloosa and started teaching guitar. He was not only a good guitar player, but a great keyboard player as well.
Okay.
So I met Paul in Tuscaloosa, and he became my mentor. And we had a band together called the South Camp, and we played around Tuscaloosa and various clubs and sometimes in the Quadrangle. This was during the day of Haight-Ashbury, by the way. Okay. So, that was beginning to happen on all kind of college campuses. And so we became one of the bands that would play a free show in the Quadrangle and the Open. And so Paul and I became friends. He taught me a lot, especially on keyboard. And Paul gets a call from Macon, Georgia, from Capricorn Records, Capricorn Studios, who was just starting up. The Allman Brothers Band had just formed and had done their first record. And Paul gets a call saying, hey, we need people that can produce records, that can play on recording sessions. Would you be interested in coming to Macon and engaging? So Paul said, yeah, it was an opportunity, right? He had been, teaching guitar in a little music store in Tuscaloosa, so going to another major studio obviously made sense. So Paul goes to Macon, And myself and a good friend of mine who was a bass player, Charlie Hayward, said, hey, we better go see what's going on in Macon, Georgia. You know, Paul's going over there. Must be something to it. So we did. We got in my Oldsmobile Cutlass 65 station wagon and packed up and drove over there. And we had a tour of, there was a booking agency called Paragon. They had the state-of-the-art studio, Capricorn Studios. They had offices, you know, for the record company. And to go a little further, when the doors of the office opened up, there were two gorgeous women sitting in the reception area, one which is my wife of 52 years now.
Yeah.
So, you know, we were enthralled. And as opposed to Muscle Shoals, what I said earlier, that it appeared to me that if I wanted to break into the scene in Muscle Shoals, it was going to take a long time. I was 15, 16 years old. These guys were in their 20s and more experienced, and they were going to get the cream of the crop recording sessions, and I might get the crumbs, you know. And I did get the crumbs, by the way. You know, I got a few sessions in Muscle Shoals, but at Capricorn and Macon, they were like, come on over here. We need musicians. We want you. You know, we'll find you something to do, right? So that was the attraction, and that's what happened. I moved over to Macon in earnest in 1970 and started moving up the ladder.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask about your early career, obviously the stuff of legends. Can you walk us through how you connected with the Allman Brothers Band?
Yes. Well, as I moved to Macon, the first thing I did was they put a group together that was part musicians from Tuscaloosa and part musicians from Macon. And we called it Sundown, which was aptly named because that's about how long the band lasted. But we did one record, and we toured a little bit, and this lasted maybe a year and a half. So that was the first thing I did in Macon. And then there was a guy named Alex Taylor. Alex was James Taylor's elder brother, and he was on the Capricorn label. Alex was more of a kind of honker and shouter blues guy, you know, blue-eyed soul sort of guy. And Alex had done a record for Capricorn, and it had gotten a little bit of attention, and Alex needed a band to tour with. So I became part of that band, and we spent 2 years, I guess, with Alex. That was my first experience in traveling all around the country. We had 6 guys in a Ford LTD station wagon, and we must have put 200,000 miles on that thing. But it was wonderful. You know, we were going all the way up to the East Coast, up into New York and beyond, up in Maine and across the country. Here in Indianapolis, we played with Alex. We just, you know, we were a working band. So that gave me a lot of experience, and you know, working with other musicians that were also beginning to, you know, hone their skills in, so to speak. That lasted a couple of years. We did a second record with Alex, and all this time, the community of music at Capricorn was growing. The Allman Brothers were becoming more well known. Other acts were coming in and being signed. Wet Willie was one of the bands. The Marshall Tucker Band came in. And so I was engaging every now and then with recording sessions with these other artists. Well, finally, Alex had a falling out with Phil Walden, who was the owner of Capricorn Records and also managing Alex. And we were out of a gig. So Alex said, well, I'm not going to do any more touring and make Phil Walden any more money, you know. They had this big argument and falling out. And so at the same time, here comes Dr. John, who was signed to a management contract by Phil Walden. And he's just done a record and needs a touring band, right? So Phil said to all of us that had been working with Alex, well, why don't you go audition, you know, for Dr. John? So we did, down to the studio. And, of course, we knew who Dr. John was. I was a big fan. I had followed him. He's a great New Orleans piano stylist from that incredible club of New Orleans piano players that have influenced so many of us. Mm-hmm. And that was quite a deal. But let me keep moving forward and say that we became Dr. John's band. We opened up a lot of shows for the Allman Brothers Band. And backing up even a little bit, so did Alex Taylor. So as time had gone on, there was, again, this community in various situations where we would open up for the Allmans, and we became somewhat friends. At the time, I really didn't know Greg and Dwayne all that well. But so then the tragedy of Dwayne losing his life in the motorcycle accident in 1971. And Dwayne, by the way, was not only the undisputed leader of the Allman Brothers Band, but he was a figurehead for all of us Southern musicians. Mm-hmm. We admired him so much. He had done all these recordings with all these different artists, I mentioned earlier Wilson Pickett, Aretha Franklin, and he had done, his career had exploded, and we all had this great admiration for Dwayne, and now he's gone, a terrible tragedy. Well, the band, the Allmans, had some obligations on tour after Dwayne passed away. You can imagine how difficult that was. Yeah. They went out as a 5-piece band with no replacement for Dwayne, because you don't replace Dwayne. And that put a lot of pressure on Dickie Betts, as you can imagine, who was a great guitar player, but who had never played slide, which Dwayne was known so much for. And they came back from this tour exhausted, mentally exhausted, physically exhausted, and they were taking a break. Greg Allman wanted to do a solo record, and I got called in to do that, So Greg had some songs he felt didn't quite fit the Allmans and wanted to do this solo record. So we start this project, and by the way, that was his first solo record called Laid Back. And as that process was going on, we were having fun. It's a different set of musicians. It's going great. And after maybe a couple of weeks, these impromptu jam sessions started happening where the rest of the Allmans would come down. Dickie would come down, J-Mo and Butch, the 2 drummers, Barry Oakley, the bass player. And we would have these after-hours jam sessions. And we might play a blues song, we might play an Allman Brothers song, we might just pick a key and go. And I was a part of these jam sessions. And after a little bit of doing this, Phil Walden sends me a message through his associate saying, "I want to see you in my office." And I thought, and I'm 20 years old, right? Yeah. So I'm beginning to climb up the ladder, having mild success, playing with a little different people, doing this Greg Allman record and feeling pretty good about it. And my thought was, well, what the hell did I do wrong? I got to go see the principal now, And so I walk in the room to see Phil, and there's all the guys in the band spread around the room. What's going on here? And a few pleasantries goes down, and then Phil, speaking on behalf of the band, said, well, listen, the guys feel like these jam sessions are pretty interesting and going, and the band wants to do a record when Greg finishes his project, and how would you like to be on that record, and how would you like to join the Allman Brothers Band? Didn't take me long to say, oh, well, okay. And, oh, darn, okay, sure, why not? And that's how it happened. And then we began almost simultaneously, but we had already gotten maybe 3/4 of the way through Greg's project. And we started recording the Brothers and Sisters record, which had Ramblin Man and Jessica, Come and Go Blues, and those songs. And it became a pretty big record.
Yeah, fantastic.
So Jessica, there's got to be, that piano part in that song, that's got to be a story in itself. How does that, tell me about it.
Well, first of all, I'll give you the story of the song itself. So Dickie Betts wrote the song, and he had a daughter named Jessica, a little toddler about 2 years old, and he was listening to Django Reinhardt records. And for those that don't know Django, he's like a gypsy guitarist from the 30s, right? And he had this real bouncy acoustic methodology of playing the guitar. And he's listening to Django, and he's watching his daughter at play, a little toddler, and she's jumping around. And so he picks up the guitar, and he comes up with that intro. If you listen to the first part of that song, there's a little acoustic guitar intro. And that was the beginning of it. And then he put the melody together, and then he brought it to the band. And we all listened to it, and you know, my first thought was, this sounds like a pretty good vehicle for a piano, you know. So thank you very much, Dickie. And we started working on it. We started working on the arrangement, and you know, everybody contributed something. I came up with the passage that, the breakdown that goes into the piano solo, and then the passage that goes from the piano solo into the guitar solo, which is this ascending figure. Mm-hmm. And you know, as I said, I immediately recognized that this was a great vehicle for me, right? And so, knowing that I was invited to have a solo on it, I thought about that, and I said, I've got to make this work. I got to really make a contribution here. You know, I don't want to just say any old solo. This thing has to really shine and work. And so I worked on it, you know, and I thought about different phrases and everything. I came up with the first little phrase, which is kind of like saying hello, if you will, and then to carry on from that. And so it was partially improvised, that solo, and partially scripted. And then, you know, coming out of it, I said, well, I need to give a signal to the band that I'm finished with my solo, and I came up with that 16th note figure on the right hand, bum, 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 bum. And that kind of tells everybody, okay, I'm done. And then the figure, as I mentioned before, the ascending figure that takes it into Dickie's solo. So that's the story, and you know, Lord blessed us, and it became a hit instrumental record. And you know, this is in an era that you didn't hear a lot of instrumental records on the radio, you know, which was unusual, but it seems to have stood the test of time, which is a beautiful thing.
Now, when you would play Jessica live, would you stick to it, or would you improvise on it?
You know, these days when I do it, I came up with the idea of when the breakdown happens to extend that. Mm-hmm. So you have drums and percussion holding the beat, but no other instruments than that and the piano. Mm-hmm. And so I can just go off and improvise and have fun with that and extend that. But then when I'm done and we kick into the solo with all the other instruments coming in, I always start with that first phrase, which is so familiar to the audience. And I'll do some of the phrases that are still on the record, but I'll expand on it.
Okay, yeah.
So, you know, you don't want to just do it the same way every time. You know? Right. You want to have a little bit of invention to carry it on.
Right. Do people ever give you flack like you didn't play it right? You didn't.
No, fortunately, we usually get a pretty good reaction.
Yeah, I'm sure. So, talking about walking into Capricorn, seeing Rose Lane there.
Yes.
I mean, talk about that's kind of a magical thing, you know, just to think about. Like, I mean, you didn't know it at the time, but that's going to be the love of your life.
Well,
you know?
First of all, there were the two women there. And it's ironic that Rose Lane's maiden name was White, okay? Mm-hmm. And the other woman was an African-American, beautiful woman named Carolyn Brown.
Oh, really?
So you had White and Brown, you know. And they were both just really sweet girls. And, you know, Rose Lane was really excited to have that position working in a record label, you know, for in the 60s, or early 70s, I should say. That was a pretty big deal. Well, you know, obviously I was impressed with both, but I didn't have any money. I was, you know, very young. I was talking about at the time I was 17 years old, you know, when I first went to Capricorn. And even though I was impressed with this, the notion didn't occur to me that I would be dating her.
Yeah.
But a couple of years later, or close to 3 years later, I get the gig with the Allman Brothers Band, and Rose Lane has set up this special, as far as I know, I think it was the first radio simulcast. So you put together 40 different radio stations across the country to broadcast a live event. The live event was the Allman Brothers Band playing at the Warehouse in New Orleans, which was a famous venue for rock and roll players to play. So because she had set all of this up, everyone in the company said, well, Rosalane, you need to be at this show. You know, you work so hard to put all this together. So she comes down to New Orleans, and the promoter has a big dinner the night before the show. And I saw my chance. You know, now I'm with a known band. I'm doing pretty good, made a dime or two, and I said, well, I wonder if Rosalane would be my date at this dinner. And so, to my surprise, she accepted, and 6 months later, we were married.
Oh, wow. Oh. That's amazing. Fantastic. And your time with the Allman Brothers, you were kind of with them until they ended up breaking up, right?
Yes, there was a temporary breakup in 1976. I joined in 72. We had the success of Brothers and Sisters, and we were playing stadium shows, you know, 50, 60,000 people, and, you know, traveling in a private plane. And it was, for a 20-year-old kid, it was all wide-eyed, you know, what? I get to do this? Huh? What? And I tried to keep my head screwed on straight because I was interested in the music, you know. I mean, the success was great, but I wanted the music to be right. So tried to stay focused on that. Well, without going into great detail, in 76, the band started having some difficulties, and the band temporarily broke up. That's when three of us, myself, J-Mo, one of the drummers from the Allmans, and Lamar Williams, who replaced Barry Oakley on bass after Barry passed away. We had been doing these little jam sessions. J-Mo called us We Three. And Jay loved jazz music, and so he was kind of pushing Lamar and I both to listen to a lot of these artists like Chick Corea, Cannonball Adderley, and Herbie Hancock, and you know, just this wide array of jazz players. And we were becoming more and more interested in that, and not that we felt like we would ever be jazz players, but we were affected by that genre. Yeah. And so when we would do these little We Three jam sessions, sometimes we would go into modes like that, you know, and improvise. And so as the Allmans are breaking up, the three of us kind of looked at each other and said, well, we could separate and go on our merry way and everybody do something different, or maybe we can make something out of this little trio. I felt like we needed a fourth member, and so I recruited my old friend Jimmy Knowles, who had played guitar with Alex Taylor and with Dr. John in those bands. And Jimmy came down and played with us, and it felt really great. So we did our first record at Sea Level as a quartet. And we did actually shop on other record labels. We made some demos and sent them around to Columbia, to RCA, and to some other labels. But Capricorn stepped up and said, no, listen, we want this. You know, you guys are part of our history. And so they made us the best offer and convinced us that they would do the best job in promoting the band. So we stayed on Capricorn.
Yeah, okay. And Sea Level, the name comes from?
Yes, my family, my name is spelled Leavell, and I grew up as a Level.
Okay, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So, and most people that have that name pronounce it Level, but there is a faction of people that use Leavell. So when I joined the Allman Brothers Band, Greg and Dickie and the other guys really didn't care to do radio interviews, and the company is saying, hey, we need some promotion here. And so I stepped up. I said, well, I'll do it, you know. I'm the new guy anyway, so maybe that'll be an angle we can use. And I'd go into the radio station, and the guy would look at my name and say, well, we have Chuck Leavell here today from the Allman Brothers Band. And I said, you know, that sounds pretty good. And as I researched it, I found out that the original name is Leavell, which means the valley. So of the valley.
Yeah, yeah.
So I legitimately repronounced it Leavell.
Okay, that's awesome.
But Sea Level.
Sea Level, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
That's where it came from.
Yeah.
The initial C and the last name Level, or the word Level.
Right, right. Very cool.
So some time goes by, not too long, and you'd shared with us, you're thinking maybe the phone's not ringing, this and that was kind of the story. And then you get a call. So let's talk about that, because that turned into 40 plus years, right?
Yeah, okay. We'll get there, Colin. We'll get there.
So I was like, I want the meat.
But at this juncture, okay, Rosie and I had been married. We'd gone through the Allman Brothers Band era and the Sea Level era. Sea Level came to an end after doing 5 records and almost 6 years together. And at the same time, at the end of the Sea Level era, Rose Lane's grandmother passes away and leaves her about 1,000 acres of land. And of course, during all these years, we go out to the country, spend time with the family, and this whole ethic of stewardship of the land began to rub off on me, because I saw the passion that the family had in farming and just looking after the land and the wildlife, et cetera, et cetera. So now here I am, basically without a band. I have a little trio that I'm playing locally in clubs, and it's not going well. The phone's not ringing for recording sessions, but at the same time, this new thing has come into our lives. We have a responsibility to carry on a heritage of stewardship of the land. And so I'm very interested in this. I want to learn about it. I go to the library and check out books and talk to others and go to meetings about wildlife management and seminars and whatnot. And so I come home one day, and we had actually moved to the country at this point. I think we'd been living in the country maybe 8 months or something. And I was somewhat despondent, I talked to Rose Lane. I said, well, listen, honey, I'm never going to give up music, but, phone's not ringing. I got this trio. It's not really going anywhere. But I really am interested in loving this whole country life and learning about stewardship. And she listened very patiently. And at the end of all this, she said, well, that's interesting, Chuck, but the Rolling Stones called you today. I said, honey, I don't need this joke right now. Don't pull my leg. She said, no, Chuck, here's the phone number. It was a representative of Bill Graham's office that called. And Bill Graham, by the way, for anybody that doesn't know, was a big promoter of rock and roll, and he loved the Allman Brothers Band, and it was Bill that suggested my name to the Stones. And so he had become the tour director for the Rolling Stones, and that's how all this happened. So I said, well, okay. We go to the phone, dial the number. I got a woman on the phone, and I said, listen, I don't know if this is true or not, but my name is Chuck Leavell, and I understand that there's a band that might be looking for me.
A band.
She said, well, I'll pass this message on. Thank you very much. Click, And within hours, probably 5-6 hours, I get a call from Ian Stewart, who I mentioned earlier was the founder of the Rolling Stones, and at this point a confidant of the Stones, and just a beautiful human being and a great piano player himself, as I mentioned. So, Stu said, yes, the band is quite interested in having an audition with you. And I said, well, Stu, I've got a little gig at the club this weekend. This is on a Thursday. Can I come up Monday? We'd really like to have you there tomorrow. Whoa, okay. Wow. Well, call the club, tell them what's going on. They're cool with it. Hey, go, man. Are you kidding me? So I go up, within hours, 36 hours, I'm on a plane for an audition. And eventually it all worked out.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. I read a comment that I think Rose Lane had put on the history of Charlane Plantation, where she said, you were leaving to be with the Stones for like 4 months or something, and she was worried that she loved the country life too. Loved the plantation, and just you both have that passion for it, and she wanted to make sure that what she said it. I think she wrote. She wanted to make sure the name Leavell was synonymous with forestry.
Well, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. She did say that after we had, both agreed that. Well, first of all, you have to understand that when she inherited that property, we had a very nice home in Macon. This was the second home that we had bought. We were very comfortable there. And all of a sudden, this occurs. And we weren't really sure in the beginning that we wanted to live in the country, right?
Okay,
but the family said, well, look, we're worried about vandalism. The house that the grandmother lived in was isolated in the middle of kind of nowhere, if you will, on a dirt road. And we're worried about vandalism and so forth. Why don't you guys come out and stay for a while until you figure out what you want to do, right? So we said, yeah, that makes sense. And after we're there for 10 days, we look at each other and say, are you kidding me? This is the greatest thing in the world. And love living in the country, quiet and beautiful and surrounded by nature. And that's when the interest in forestry and specifically came into play. It was actually my brother-in-law, Alton, at a breakfast table one day that said, because you have to understand that what Rose Lane inherited was a diversified farm. There were row crops on it, there were cattle on it, and there was some timber.
And it was active. It wasn't.
Oh yeah,
it was being worked at that time.
Absolutely active, yeah. And so we're trying to sort all this out. How do we handle this? And I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't want to stop my musical career. I want to keep that going. But what do we do with this situation? And it was my brother-in-law, Alton, at a breakfast table said, well, listen, there's a 50-acre field that we usually plant a crop on every year. And if you're not going to do that, you might consider just putting trees on it, And kind of a light bulb goes off in my head. Trees, okay, long term, not a lot of day-to-day, because the day-to-day of row cropping, cattle farming, that's what concerned me about following my musical career. How could I do both, right? And I didn't think I could. But long-term forestry, good for the earth, good for people, good for wildlife. But something occurred to me, and that was this. Where does that thing that has given me so much joy and such a great career come from, right? The instrument, the piano, is mostly out of wood. There's some wires and metal involved as well. And but the thought occurred to me, well, this would be a way of giving back. Not that I would be growing the type of wood that's used to make musical instruments, but it's still giving back to the resource that has given me so much. So that kind of gave me a spiritual reason to go into forestry.
Yeah.
And that's when I really began to study forestry and eventually enrolled in a correspondence course. I was traveling with the fabulous Thunderbirds at the time, beautiful Texas blues band that I worked with for about a year. And I would do the homework, send it in. And that course, is nothing like going to a 4-year forestry school by any means, but it was a good course, and it gave me a lot of basic information, and it gave me confidence to say, I can do this. This makes sense. It makes sense to me. And so that's when Rose Lane came up with that phrase, I would like our name to be synonymous with the word forestry.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And from there, I know the name of the plantation, Charlane.
Yes,
comes from your names put together, right?
Yes, when you hear about these fairly large tracts of land, oftentimes they'll name it something, and sometimes they'll take the name of the family and spell it backwards, or they'll come up with some other. Well, we tried all kinds of things. We took the letters and mixed them up, but nothing seemed to make sense. And for some reason, I said, well, let's take the first 4 letters of my proper name, Charles, C-H-A-R, and Rose Lane's middle name, and that kind of sounds good.
Yeah,
Charlane.
Yeah.
So. And staying with the pronunciation from my French heritage, Charles would be Charles in French, so Charlane seemed to make sense.
Yeah, quite beautiful, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah, it worked out very nice. So how did you find the balance of being on the road with the Stones plus having this responsibility of the plantation? I mean, how did that kind of work out for you? And when you were on the road, were you thinking about trees? And when you were working with trees, were you thinking about being on the road? Like, how's that balance work?
Well, first of all, you have to know that when I got the position with the Stones in 1982, Rose Lane was pregnant with our second daughter, with Ashley.
Wow, yeah.
And so, I look at her and I say, honey, you're supposed to give birth while I'm on tour, and I don't feel comfortable about this. And said, Chuck, go. Now the first birth was by cesarean. She had a very long labor that, obviously didn't come together, and so the doctor said, let's do a cesarean. So the second birth was going to be by cesarean, and we knew exactly what the date was going to be for the birth, right? And this coincided with the Stones tour, right? And I said, honey, I feel, I'm not sure I should leave you alone here. She said, Chuck, I'll be fine. Just go. This is an amazing opportunity for your career and for your life. I'll be okay. I've got family. She did. Her mom was still alive at the time, and her brother and others, members of the family were. I said, well, okay, I guess so. So sure enough, July the 8th in '82, Ashley is born, and the band put a nice banquet together. It was to honor Ashley, but also one of the members of the security team had a birthday that same day, and he had been a long time confidant of the band's, and so they kind of combined. We called him JC's birthday and Ashley's birth together, and we had this wonderful dinner, really beautiful thing with the band and the crew. It was probably about 25, 30 of us there. And Keith, bless him, stood up and made a toast. He said, I want to welcome into the world, and Ashley's middle name is Rose because Rose Lane, and Rose Lane's mom is named Rosalind, so Rose is kind of a thing, right? So Keith says, I propose a toast to Ashley Rose and her first pose.
Fantastic. Wow.
But yeah, so of course I was thinking of my newborn daughter, of my wife, of my firstborn daughter, of the trees and the forest and the land and the family, all during the time that I was on that tour. But it all worked out. I got back home and became, a dad again, and started studying even more forestry and wildlife concerns and whatnot. And I've tried to keep that balance ever since.
I think, a lot of people could say, how could you be away from the birth of your child? But really, I think that's a great testimony to you and your wife's just such dedication to make each other successful, right? Just like she wanted that for you so bad.
That's correct.
Right. And the same for you probably with everything that she was doing. I mean, I think that's something that probably a lot of people don't think about when you get into marriage. The amount of, it has to become very selfless, right? You have to put the other person first.
You do, and it's a partnership. You support each other in whatever it is. Rose Lane went on to have a great career as an artist, and she's a great visual artist. She had a great career as a business owner. She had a boutique called a women's clothing boutique called Cornucopia that was so popular in Macon, Georgia. I still have women that come up to me, God, I wish your wife still had. I've got dresses that, that I still wear, and so she had her own career. Always has had her own career, and of course, the heritage of what we do as land managers is her heritage,
right?
Her family heritage. Right. So. We've always supported each other, but you're right. That was a tough decision. It was a tough time, and I had guilt feelings about leaving her and not being there for her during that birth. But at the same time, how do you turn down an opportunity as a musician for a band, whether it's the Rolling Stones or some other entity that is already well established and that you feel like you can contribute to, I was like, hey, I can engage with these guys. When I went up for that audition, some people say, well, were you nervous? I mean, you're auditioning for Mick and Keith, and, Bill Wyman was still in the band, and Ronnie Wood and Charlie Watts, how did you feel about that? And my first thought was, okay, Chuck, I think you played these songs when you were in the Misfitz. Remember the song "The Last Time"? This could be the last time. That was one of the first songs I ever learned on guitar, So my thought was, first of all, Chuck, you know most of this stuff already. You played it as a kid. And second of all, they put their pants on the same way you do.
Right.
So go up there and have fun. If you don't get to gig, you had fun. If you get to gig, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, it worked out for 43 years for me now. So
yeah,
it's 43 years with the Stones. This, tours. I'm sure at times that's a hectic life, that rock and roll lifestyle. But at the same time, you're married for 50 plus years now.
Yep.
You become Tree Farmer of the Year. You and Rose Lane accomplish all of these things on the plantation. That balance, is the plantation and Rose Lane sort of the center of that for you? Is that how that works? I mean, when I think of the Rolling Stones, I can only imagine, or what I want to imagine what goes on tour. But here you are, incredibly grounded and just,
Well, that's one of the things that keeps me grounded. The responsibility of being a good forest landowner, a steward. Stewardship is an interesting word. It comes from Germanic descent. It comes from two words. The first word is Steig, S-T-E-I-G. The second is word, W-E-R-D. Steig refers to a sty or a pen for keeping domestic animals. Word refers to a warden, a person that's in charge of this. And now, people will say, well, that's interesting, but so what? But when you think about it, you're talking about ancient times in this part of the world. This was a high position, a position of great responsibility, a position of great honor. Because if something were to happen to those animals, it could mean devastation to the tribe, to the community, So it was not to be taken lightly. And once I learned that and started feeling that and, saw, the heritage that the family had of looking after the land and the love, the passion, the dedication, it rubbed off on me is all I can say, and it's still rubbing off on me. And I still consider myself a student of land management. Yeah. And it's not just about trees and forests. It's about the flora and fauna within, and it's about the future. Yeah. What you want that land to be when I'm no longer here, because that land's going to be here long after I'm gone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And talk a little bit about, so your involvement in conservation, everything goes well past Charlane at this point, right? I mean, you sit on multiple boards and associations and.
Yes, and I really enjoyed my time doing that. I was on the board of the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities for 6 years. I was on the board of the American Forest Foundation, have engaged with the Georgia Conservancy and with the Nature Conservancy, and I love all that. I love being active as an advocate. And, then in my early travels after starting this process of being a land manager, sometimes as on tour I would meet people backstage and, oh, you're a tree farmer? Well, that's kind of interesting. But isn't it terrible what they're doing to the trees? Well, what do you mean? Well, they're just cutting them down. I go by this place and it looks like a bomb went off. There's just some horrible clear cut and, isn't that terrible? And these awful loggers, what are they thinking? These horrible loggers, And I'll be listening to this, and I said, well, tell me about your house. Well, we got a nice house. Is there any wood in that house? Well, as a matter of fact, yeah, I bet you got some nice furniture. Oh, yes, nice furniture, Well, and by the way, that clear cut that you saw is probably going to be replanted next season, and it's going to be a young forest eventually, and then it's going to grow into a beautiful, mature forest. And, do you play a musical instrument? Yeah, I play guitar. Well, where do you think that guitar comes from? So I began to see there was so much misconception about the practice of forestry. And I wanted to do something about that. So I wrote a book called Forever Green, The History and Hope of the American Forest. The truth is there was a time in America's history where they pillaged the forest, in the 1800s as expansion was going on, settlement moving ever westward, land being cleared for agriculture, being cleared to make homes and towns, being cleared eventually when railroads came in to make trestles and bridges and railroad ties and so forth, and the timber barons of the time that would just cut and run, and that was terrible. But then you had, during the turn of the century, 1899 into 1900, you had figures like Theodore Roosevelt come into play. Gifford Pinchot, who was the first real forester, had studied forestry in Europe and brought that information back to the United States. Conservationists like John Muir came into play. Frederick Law Olmsted, who did the Central Park landscape, as well as many other parks and open spaces throughout the country. Carl Schenck, started the first forestry school in America in the Mount Pisgah area of North Carolina near Asheville. And so all these people came together and said, wait a minute, we got to, we're losing our forests. We got to start changing our practices. We have to start being sustainable, and we have to plant, and we have to manage. And so, from that point forward to now, America has done a great job in managing our forests. Yeah. We have more forest land now than we had 100 years ago, which is remarkable.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, it goes to the fact that I wanted to act as an advocate. I wanted to get these misconceptions straightened out. Yeah. And so from the first book, The Forever Green, then I realized, and you and I talked about this some, Dustin, getting children in tune with nature at an early age. And so I wrote a children's book called The Tree Farmer, where basically the theme is a grandson goes to his grandfather's tree farm for the first time, and his grandfather leads him around, and the boy is kind of skeptical, and then he begins to realize all the things that the trees and forests are doing, and the forest products, etc. So then I realized we do have somewhat of a problem with rampant growth in this country because the population keeps expanding. We're not going to stop that. We don't want to stop that. But we want to be careful how we grow. So I said, I'd like to do a book, and it's called Growing a Better America, Smart, Strong, and Sustainable, where I began to study smart growth, basically, and seeing some of these communities. There's a great community in Atlanta called Serenbe, where this guy has put together, instead of having lawns, they have more natural vegetation around their houses. All the houses are built sustainably out of sustainable products like wood. The air conditioning and stuff, they're using geothermal and other techniques. So I tried to, get that out to the public. And then finally, I realized, of all this advocacy and doing media work and everything else, I would love to have a television program because visuals are everything. If you can show people what a sawmill looks like and what a sawmill does, if you can show people, partnering with like the Nature Conservancy and Pheasants Forever and, including those elements into the forest and the management of the forest and so forth. Yeah. So America's Forest came into play. We've done 13 episodes to date.
And that's on PBS.
Yes.
You can see all those now. Yep.
It's on PBS. It's also available on Amazon Prime.
Oh, yep.
You can type that in. And we also have a website, americasforestwithchuckleavell.com.
Yeah.
But I love doing that show. And as I said, if you can show people, the visuals and walk them through these processes. And what's interesting about it is we've been doing it state by state. So the forests in California are going to be a lot different from the forest in Georgia or forest in New Hampshire or wherever. And so it's really interesting to show these different forest types and the different usages of forests. For instance, in California, one of the segments we did was the Fender Guitar Company.
Oh, yeah.
And how do they procure the wood that they get to make these instruments, and you know, they have a passion for making these instruments. It's beautiful. So have a lot of fun with the program. We hope it's ongoing. As I said, we've done 13 episodes. We have one episode coming up to shoot in Georgia this year. And we're working very hard on an Indiana.
We're working hard.
You know, we met with the governor, and boy, has he got a beautiful place.
Yeah.
And he is so dedicated.
Well-known tree
Yes,
farmer. Yeah.
tree farmer, just beautiful. So thank you, Mike. I think he's been supportive of this Indiana concept.
Yeah, we'd love to see an Indiana show for sure. Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
good deal. Let's get it done.
We'll
Yeah,
get
yeah,
there. Yeah. Fantastic.
If you're, what advice would you give somebody that doesn't have a plantation, that is interested in being a steward of our forests? You know, what advice would you give somebody that was interested in really making a difference and promoting and educating themselves on that, and wanted to work with others? What would you say to them?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, as I mentioned a minute ago, children's education in this, this genre is so important. Yeah. Bring the outdoors into the classroom.
Yeah.
Make sure, and I recently, and I've worked through the years, but recently we just hosted a wonderful group of teachers. I think there was 30 of them from the state of Georgia, throughout all the state, who are engaging in a program to take tours of forest land. They took tours of our land. They took a tour of a pulp mill, a graphic company which makes box products, cereal boxes, Amazon boxes, all kind of boxes. So they see, the paper products that come from trees. So the whole idea is to teach the teachers how to teach the children about these outdoor issues. That's paramount, because let's face it, most of the kids you're in cities, right? They don't get a chance so much to. Maybe they get to go to a park, but they don't so much engage directly with the outdoors. So to be able to have the teachers have a way to educate them on these matters is paramount. The other thing is urban forestry is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so people can engage in that. Support your parks, plant trees around your school, around your neighborhood. Get your neighbors engaged in having green spaces and preserving those spaces and so forth. So there's a lot of things people can do without being a tree farmer.
Yeah. And it's pretty cool to see it. When you look, there's a lot of local resources, I would say, for everyone. So serving on the Indiana Hardwood Lumber Association board and being part of that association, part of that program is a educational program called Woods on Wheels. And
wonderful.
We've got a truck and a trailer, and it goes around to our local middle schools, elementary schools, high schools. So I want to show that to you. Make sure you've got a link so you can check that out. It's very cool. But
I certainly will, and that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
To have those kinds of programs that so that the outdoors is not just taken for granted.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see their response. I mean, to that, and go inside that trailer and see all those different woods, and it's like, oh, okay, that's here, that's right here, that's in my backyard.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
And that ties it into the urban. You don't have to have. You don't have to have any land,
right.
Right. No, that's right. But,
to interact.
There's a lot of resources out there now too. I know, you've got apps you can scan a leaf and it'll tell you what kind of tree it is.
Hey man, I've got there's a great app called Picture This.
Yeah.
And I use that thing all the time. Going through the forest, you have a little camera function. You take a picture of a blade of grass or a plant or the bark of a tree, and it's unbelievable. I mean, it's not 100% accurate, but I would say it's 85 to 90%
Yeah,
accurate.
the one I use is pretty close. And my boys are always asking, "Hey, what's that? What's that tree? Get that app out." Let's see." I think on our property we've got probably 20 species of trees. It's a hodgepodge, you know. Yeah. And they're like, I can't remember what that was, and I can't remember either. So I'll pull it out and we'll take a look at it, And I think engaging youth from a technology standpoint is really important too, because there is so much technology out there now to interact with our resources. And I think I think that's something to think about moving forward too, is how do we, because I mean, the younger generation's not moving away from technology. That I don't see that happening. I mean, there's a movement for off grid and all that, but it's not going to be the masses that's going to do that. No. So, I really appreciate some of these companies trying to get technology involved in a way where you can interact with the outdoors.
Yep.
Yeah.
But still have technology as a part of it.
How do we integrate that together for our kids? What's that look like?
Yeah, that's right.
Happen.
Absolutely. And, schools that have a little bit of property surrounding can make a nature trail, a nature walk, and engage kids in that way. Or even if that's not the case, the community can maybe have a green space somewhere where you can put that together.
Yeah.
Right.
And, there's a great quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson that I used at the front of one of the chapters of my Forever Green book, and that is, "In the woods we return to reason and faith." And what a beautiful quote. And, as we know, we have a country that's somewhat politically divided these days.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, if we could have those meetings with those lawmakers in the woods, maybe we'd have a different outcome.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, your brother-in-law and now nephew, if I'm correct. So he buys a Wood-Mizer sawmill.
Yes.
And he's got an LT50 and LT50 hydraulic, and he's got an EG200 edger. And this comes along, and so kind of tell us, had you seen anything like that? What's your relationship with the mill? And how we know that you've used some of that in building your home and some cabins.
Well, in the process of learning this stuff, I read magazines and I would see advertisements for Wood-Mizer and maybe some other brands of, portable sawmills. And I thought, wow, that's cool. You could have that on your own land, right? Yeah. Well, then Alton, my brother-in-law, in the 90s, maybe early 90s, bought a Wood-Mizer, and I think his first one was not an LT50. It was a lower grade, and after using it for a couple of years, he said, I need to upgrade, and so he got the LT50. And, hey, let me tell you something. We built our lodge out of wood that came off of Charlane, mostly dead and dying wood. I'm always cognizant of looking for lightning-struck trees, or, we have weather events that knocks a nice big pine down or an oak or whatever. And when Alton started doing this, I was like, hey, man, I can, buck it up with chainsaws, put it on my trailer. He's 7 miles from my house, drive it to him. And so we built our lodge completely out of our own wood, renovated our own home using that LT50 to saw up the lumber. Our horse pasture fence is all from our land. Our horse barn, all from our land, using that LT50. And, I've never run the mill myself, I must say, but I'm always fascinated to, Alton is no longer with us, unfortunately, but you mentioned my nephew Paul that is carrying this on. And Paul is, as good as his dad was, or even better, at running that mill, and he recently moved it to right behind his house so he can have even better access to doing that. And he does that not only for me, but for the community. Oftentimes somebody will, as I say, have a lightning-struck tree that needs to come down out of the yard right next to the house or something like that. And Paul's also very good with a chainsaw, and so, he'll sometimes even take those trees down and get them to his mill. And the community as a whole, Middle Georgia, often he gets wood from people from various sources, loggers that have done a logging operation, but you still have a few pieces that don't go to the big sawmill but can go to his mill and be sawn up. So, it's trying not to have waste.
Right.
I'm constantly, I said this earlier, but I'm constantly riding around our place looking up for brown tops, and you're not going to be able to get every tree down, right? And the woodpeckers need some anyway. Right. So some you're going to leave out there. But, when you see a nice, big, magnificent, mature oak or pine, and you just look at that thing and think, man, that would make some beautiful lumber.
Yeah.
And
right.
So what you guys manufacture is an essential part of the country way of life for those of us that are tree farmers that live on tracts of land and that like to see that wood go to good use.
Yeah. I love seeing it come full circle. I love seeing the management aspect, and then, you know, the tree has to be harvested or is harvested, and it goes to the mill. You know, you knew that tree when it was in its
Yes.
existence, you know, and then it's back and you're driving by it every day.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. You know, we had an elm tree. This was many years ago before we did renovation on our house that we live in now. An elm tree that was literally 6 inches from the edge of our house. I go on tour, well, and this was when Rose Lane could travel with me. We both go on tour for 3-4 months. We come home and that elm tree is dead.
Oh,
and,
wow.
and this is right when we were starting to think about building our lodge. Well, we have to take the tree down. And Rose Lane said, man, I hate to see that thing, go, because it meant so. It shaded my grandmother. It shaded even the people that owned this land before the grandmother and the family had bought it. And so she looked in a magazine and saw this picture of a bar that had a natural tree as part of the corner of the bar. And fortunately, we had a very talented builder at the time when we were building our lodge. And Rose Lane said to Bobby, was his name, he said, Bobby, can you do something with this? And so he cut a section out and put that thing right on the corner of our bar. And it's like you said, Colin, every time you walk by it, man, I remember that tree,
Yeah.
And there it is.
That's fantastic. We did a Wood-Mizer film with the group out from California, L.A.
Angel City Lumber.
Angel City Lumber.
Did a podcast too. Check it out.
Did a podcast with them, and they have the way they like to say it. Their goal is to honor L.A. trees.
Love that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, and that kind of that reminds me of those guys. Kind of honoring that tree by.
Yeah.
I mean, its life is so much longer.
Yes.
Now because you put it to use the way
that's
you did.
right. There's an emotional, a spiritual connection that can be had, and that's important, man. I think the more people feel that and are in tune with that, the better off we all are. I mean, people that respect the outdoors, respect trees and forests, and honor them and want them to be managed properly.
Yeah. So what's what's next for you at this point? I mean, you've lived an amazing life, but you don't seem like you're slowing down much, Chuck. Just in the little time we've gotten to know you, what's on the horizon here?
Well, I've been doing my own personal appearances this year. The Stones did have a plan to go to Europe and tour this year, but at the last minute, something came up for them. They didn't feel 100% confident about it. And so they've postponed it. I think we'll probably go out next year.
Okay.
But that's up to the principal members of the band, so we'll see how that comes about. I know that they want to work. They don't want to sit around. And they have been active doing some recording this year. So hopefully next year I'll engage with them in that if that comes around.
Yeah.
Again, I'm doing my own personal appearances. I have a documentary that maybe you guys know something about called The Tree Man.
Fantastic documentary. Yeah.
Thank you. And so I've been doing some engagements where we show an edited version of that to a group, and then I take the stage with a moderator with questions that allow me to play certain songs, tell certain stories, and that makes for a kind of a unique presentation.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic.
Been doing some of that. But working the land, man, I've been working at Charlane. We've had a great year. We've had good rain. We had a harvest last year, a thinning. Some of it was first-time thinning. Some of it was second thinning. Some was third. And so all of that, the garden is looking beautiful now. Those trees are standing up tall and pretty and healthy. I have a great forester that we work together to make sure that we're always upgrading the forest when we do a harvest, right? take out the lesser trees, the junk, and leave the best, so that it's constantly upgrading. More wildlife pouring in. I've seen more fawns and deer this year because of the management aspect. And so, that's it. And we have children and grandchildren, so we have a lot of family activities when we can. My eldest daughter just turned 50, and we had a great celebration at our place for that with family. Wonderful. And just living life, man, playing music, growing trees, and living life.
Yeah. And tell us how people can engage with you at this point. I mean, you even offer guided hunts on your property, right?
Well,
there's lots of things that you guys are doing.
Yes. We have a commercial quail hunting operation. Quail hunting is a great tradition in the Southeast, always has been. And so I got interested in that in the 90s and started grooming not only for forest but for quail specifically, which, by the way, also enhances the turkey population, songbird population, and other aspects of wildlife. So Charlane, CHARLANE.com is our website, and you can get the hunting information. We also, from time to time, host what we call retreats, which is basically hunting without the hunting. We have our lodge. We have a restored 1835 farmhouse that we call the Bullard House. It was built by a guy named Daniel Bullard back in 1835. And so we'll, from time to time, mostly in the off season, but even sometimes during the season, host a group of 6, 8, 10 people to come, stay. We cook for them. We take them on a forestry tour, either in our converted school bus or we have a big buggy that we made that kind of simulates a large mule wagon situation. It's open air and a lot of fun. And so, we're active. I mentioned the group of teachers that recently came out. We sometimes host field days and that sort of thing. Okay. But Charlane.com is where you go to get that information.
And then as far as social media, where can people find you?
ChuckLeavell.com. Again, Charlane.com. We mentioned, you were kind enough to mention the Mother Nature Network. That has been kind of bought out by a group. And now when you go to Mother Nature or MNN.com, you wound up with a website called treehugger.com. So I'm not as active as I used to be with that website when we co-founded it, but it's still got some good information. So all of those resources are good.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, we do have some selfish questions to ask.
All right.
I know Colin wrote out several, but I'm really curious about this one. What is your favorite all-time venue?
Oh, Lord. Listen, that's so hard to say. What's your favorite child, right? But I'll say this. I love playing theaters. I played Carnegie Hall with Greg Allman back in the 70s, and what a institution that is. Yeah. The Academy of Music, the Orpheum. In our town of Macon, we have the Grand Opera House. I love those theaters. Anywhere from say 700-800 up to 3,500 seats. The Fox Theater in Atlanta seats 5,000. Yeah. So I love those venues, and there's a lot of them, and I'm glad to see them preserved.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Music's a huge part of your life, and I know everyone's interested in that, but I really want to know. What's your favorite tree or your favorite forest or the favorite place that you've been? That's what I'm interested in.
Well, listen, I'm a son of the South, so, the longleaf pine was the original dominant softwood from Virginia all the way down to East Texas. And, of course, you had the Appalachians and the mountainous areas that had more hardwoods. Yeah. And, and I'm involved in the restoration of the chestnut tree.
Yes.
ACF, the American Chestnut Foundation, is a great organization. I have some of these hybrids that are 1% Chinese chestnut, 16 percent. Well, that's not correctly said. 1/16 Chinese, 15/16 American chestnut.
Okay.
So these
Okay.
are hybrids to give the resistance to the blight. They're a great organization. So I'm interested in chestnut. But the longleaf pine, being the original tree before European settlement throughout all the southeast, is very interesting, and we've been involved in restoring the longleaf. We have about 350 acres of longleaf pine.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Great.
Very good.
I think my last question is all-time favorite song. Not necessarily one that you did. I mean, it could be, right? But just
Oh man,
one that sticks out.
you know, I love. I'm known more as a rock and roller and you know, boogie woogie and that kind of thing. But I love melody. I was reading something not all that long ago from Paul McCartney, who is one of the most incredible songwriters ever, and they asked what his favorite or a song that he felt he felt really strongly about, that he did a good job in putting together, and he said Here, There, and Everywhere. And you know, it made me think back on that song and how beautiful, you know, great lyrics as well. Has a wonderful middle eight, you know, the what we would call the bridge or the B section of the song. So you know, that stands out to me. You know, a lot of the Stones melodic stuff, Angie, comes to mind. You know, some of those ballads are really strong, and I love playing them. So, again, it's kind of like Who's Your Best Child?
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Favorite song. But I will say one more, going back to rock and roll, and that is Honky Tonk Women. I was living with some guys and working on a record in Nashville at the time, and the guitar player came in the house that we were renting, and he said, I've got it. You got what, man? I was driving down the road, listening to the radio. The Stones' new song came on. It's called Honky Tonk Women. I pulled over, listened to it. It was unbelievable. I went straight to the record store, and you know, it was a 45, a single. And he said, here it is. And so we put that thing on the turntable, listened to it like 50 times. And it's just got so much charm to it. And here's the ironic thing. There's no piano on that song. There's guitar, bass, drums, some horns, harmony, vocals, a cowbell. But when I was integrated into the Stones family, they said, well, we got to give Chuck a feature. Why don't you take a solo on Honky Tonk Women? So that's become my little feature every time we play.
Yeah.
So that song's special to me.
That's fantastic.
Just like Jessica is from the Allman Brothers era.
Yeah.
And Old Love from the Eric Clapton Unplugged
Yeah.
record. And so, you know, I've been very fortunate to work with all these bands and artists. Did a tour with David Gilmour, as you may know, about 8 or 9 years ago. Got to sing the counterpart to Comfortably Numb, and that was very special. And there was a live release called Live in Pompeii with David Gilmour. And then, of course, again, mentioning the Eric Clapton Unplugged record that we did, and that was a very special event.
Very cool. Thanks for entertaining my what's your favorite question. That's always
Glad
the
to
hardest
do
ones
it.
to answer, right?
It's been a pleasure to be with you guys.
Yeah.
No, it's
Thank
been
you so
incredible,
much,
Chuck.
Chuck.
Yeah,
All right.
thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
Really
Yeah.
appreciate it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, best of luck, and keep making those beautiful Wood-Mizers.
Okay, we're
Absolutely.
going to keep making beautiful music.
You got it.
Yeah. Thanks
Perfect.
everybody for listening. Really appreciate all of our audience, and be sure to like and subscribe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks.